Warning. The following podcast may cause you to change your understanding of what it really means to be a human being. Side effects may range from a minor loss to complete annihilation of ego, a feeling of merging with something bigger than previously conceived, and a deep, abiding peace. Please, continue at mortal risk to yourself as a separate entity. Welcome. Enjoy.
Greetings, all one-time live listeners. This is Ken Jenkins, your humble host. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 4, continuing conversations with Stone Age skills expert Chris Morasky. This conversation was recorded on the 4th of May in 2021. Chris was in his gear out in Montana. And it's actually recorded on video, too, which I will be posting on YouTube. And when I'm ready for subscribers, when there's sufficient content, I'll be putting the word out. And I really hope that you would subscribe so that I can give it a simple web address. Otherwise, YouTube makes you go with some crazy, nonsensical thing. So, anyways, heads up for that. Look forward to it. If you have any questions, comments, etc., as always, drop me a line at allonetimellive@gmail.com. When it comes to talking with Chris Morasky, I mean, he is from his own direct experience, which is always the highest authority for your life and the words and wisdom you have to share. He has dedicated most of his adult life to listening to the song of place and learning from it, understanding how to read his environment from the many signals that there are in the plant and wildlife. And he's a very good teacher, which he does do professionally, and he is, in many respects, always teaching. So when he's talking with me in this conversation, he is really sharing not just perspectives and experiences, but meaningful, useful information. And now, it's the 21st of March 2022, and there's a war going on, and I won't talk much about that because, gosh knows, you've probably heard a lot about it already. Not that it doesn't deserve it, and in fact, I may do an episode on that coming up soon with a voice that I hope will share their insight about it. But rather, I would just like to see that as a watermark in our history as a species, in our evolution on this planet, as a measure of our success as a species on the planet. And the way I see it, which is just my perspective, but when I see unnecessary suffering, to me, it's wrong. Is there suffering that exists in life? There certainly is. It is unavoidable. Oftentimes that suffering has something to learn or even benefit from it. But when it comes to certain sufferings, such as what victims of war endure, this is, to me, unnecessary and unfortunate, and is probably the worst of one of the many indications that we are living out of balance. Others are greed and selfishness, etc. When we live in a time where our information and technology and ability as a species has the potential to uplift so much of life, humanity and non-humanity, that we could be a nurturing caretaker of each other and the planet in such a fantastic way, it seems such a sad shame that we are otherwise engaged in continuing conflict and destruction and the proliferation of misery. Just unacceptable. Yet it is so. Anyways, a voice like Chris's right now is all the more important to listen to and to bring into your own life experience so that you have your own direct experiences in learning how to listen to the song of place, learning how to operate in a way which is not just sustainable but regenerative, in understanding the wealth that there is in attention, not just in a bank account, but in creating the time and space to give attention to nurturing positive, healthy relationships among each other, with yourself, and with the rest of the ecosystem in which we exist and rely on. I always enjoy talking with Chris, and I hope that you enjoy listening to our conversation. I look forward to more conversations with Chris in this season 2. We have one not yet with a date, but agreed to happen in the near future. And the next episode, episode 5, is actually going to be, it was recorded in June of 2021, and it's going to be a month after the one that you're about to hear now. So, take a breath with me at the moment, or on your own. You don't have to wait for me. And feel the air in your lungs and the life that gives always. And if you can, have gratitude for that. And just simply be where you are. And love yourself because you deserve it, just like anyone else. And you should love, or I hope that you love, others as well. We are all one. There is no separation. There's none among us who is somehow disconnected from the infinite reality that we are a part of in an ongoing way. And to be awake to that and then mindfully engage in it, I think is a beautiful way of living. And here I so appreciate Chris's choice to mindfully engage in his community, to find how to live in harmony with nature, and to see nature as I see nature, as an endless university, a school, a source knowledge and wisdom, from the source. The mathematics and relationships of trees and things growing and things changing form. And we may say that they die, but actually they're transferring their form and energy to bring about new life. There's so much to learn when one can be present and maybe turn down or turn off the noise in our heads, whether they're in our earphones or just our own inner dialogue, and attend to this present moment and learn from what it has to offer. Chris is exceptionally gifted at that, and he shares a bit about that and more in this episode. So thank you again for joining. As always, enjoy. Here you go. Hi. Can you hear me? Hi there.
can you, yeah.
Can you see me?
I can see you too.
Cool. Hi there.
Hey,
Same dog here. He hasn't escaped us yet. He's a challenging dog, so he might bark a couple times on Thursday. So today is Tuesday, what is it, 4th of May?
could be.
Yeah,
Could be.
4th of May. May the 4th be with you. So yeah, in 2 days he's going to meet a family and maybe be adopted.
Excellent. Hey, so that's what you look like.
Yeah, sorry, man. I didn't have time to do my eyebrows or anything. Come here, buddy. Come here. Good boy. This is Mando.
Hey, Mando.
Yep. He can't hear you. His headphones are weird. Thanks for doing this. I'm already recording, but just out of habit, when we start, I just press record, but we can chat and decide to start in a little bit.
Cool.
But thanks for doing this, man. And I appreciate it because I'm in a break from doing the weekly podcast, and I'm really glad for that. And I was just listening to our last interview, and you also had a break from what you were doing, and you talked about how it sort of opens up space, and it really does. And I'm so grateful for the time and space that gives perspective, like, and in re-listening to the podcast, like I can see I'm in a different headspace, and that's because I've given myself that opportunity, and I really look forward to how that progresses and where I go with this.
Nice.
Yeah. So what have you been up to? What are you looking at there?
I'm looking at your shirt. What does your shirt say?
Oh yeah, man. The Great Wizard Jenkins. There's I think it's the guy's name is Miyazaki. He's a Japanese anime artist. He did My Neighbor Totoro, which is quite popular, and he also did Howl's Flying Castle. And in there's the Great Wizard Jenkins, and I thought, well, there's got to be a T-shirt for that. and so I looked it up and I found it on Redbubble. Happy to support individual artists.
Oh, it's fabulous.
Doing a little smudge. It's so grounding. This is it. It's the last. It's the white sage. My sagebrush sage from Montana is gone now. I put it out on my tongue because I don't like to crush it out. I know that's probably just a me thing, but that's what I do.
Yeah, I don't know people that do that other than you now.
Yeah, I don't either. But the sagebrush, you can pull off and kind of like roll together just as much as you want,
right?
Like a little ball, and you just let that burn out, and that's cool, in the shell. But with this big bundle of white sage, like I don't want to crush it down, so that's my way.
Yeah.
And I don't blow out the matches either, and that's totally a fish family tradition. You do the same?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I probably will never forget because they always said if you blow out the match, you'll bring in the wind.
Yeah.
And I was sitting right beside, I don't know, right beside somebody who was passing a pipe around there anyway, and inside the sweat, and they had asked me to be the one to relight it. And so, it goes out, it comes around, I light it, and then I blow out the match, and and people were like, oh, and then it went around again and went out, and I lit it and I blew it out a second time, and then you really heard it. Everybody was like, oh. And that was the night when we had the crazy windstorm come through, the wind that like circled camp. That one,
because it comes through, man. That's the thing, is like, you can talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy, but that I've seen that happen too.
That was a weird wind. Yeah.
And also after the camp, usually, the camp, you can have 4 days of like really peaceful weather and such. And then after everyone leaves, huge wind comes through and kind of like cleans up the camp. Like it's the maintenance crew that comes through or something.
Yeah.
So I had to look up the Missouri Breaks.
Yeah.
It has a cool name, and I thought like the breaks is like a geographical feature that I wasn't familiar with the terminology, but I understand from Wikipedia, which is of course a trustworthy source of information,
Absolutely.
infallible, that it was just sort of named by the locals because it seems that the land just breaks away. It's sort
Yeah.
of like the
Yeah.
Badlands.
Yeah. You have like a higher plateau, and then everything just kind of jumbles up and is broken down until you get into the river. But it's quite a wide stretch. It's like in some places that beginning of the break starts 10 miles from the river. So
Wow.
it's an incredibly vast area. Liam and I one day we weren't at the western edge of where the breaks begin. We were in the upper breaks, and then there's the middle breaks and the lower breaks. But um,
And the
we
lower
drove.
breaks are the closest to the river or the furthest from the river?
It's more of a like length down the river.
Okay.
So the lower
Okay. Yeah.
breaks are right before it turns into a huge reservoir, but there's still like that's still part of the breaks. And so the upper breaks are just farther upstream. And we did a drive along some of the back roads and some highway to get from where we were camping in the upper breaks down to the reservoir, and we drove all day. We drove literally 10 hours. It's
Yeah.
such a
Yeah. Yeah.
massive area.
And it's a
um
protected area.
it is, yeah, yeah. It's there's Charles M. Russell National Wildlife Refuge is a part of it, and then there's national forests and a lot of Bureau of Land Management land. Just the national refuge it's the second largest in the country. And then when you add on all of the other public land there, I don't know, it probably is the largest in the country, and almost nobody knows about it.
Yeah. No, I had to look it up, like I said.
Yeah.
Reminds me of Frank Church Wilderness Area. That was another like huge swath of land that's almost
Yeah.
uninterrupted, and very few people seem to know about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the same kind of reality that's going on in the breaks is even though most of it is not designated wilderness like the Frank Church,
Okay.
but it's still virtually unchanged. You know, there the area was divided up into homestead parcels through the Homestead Act, and then I think those were like 160-acre parcels, and it turned out that 160 acres in that country is not enough for somebody who thinks they're going to farm or raise cattle or something.
Okay. Yeah.
And so the area is just littered with abandoned cabins. But if you ignore that, everything is pretty much the way it's always been, like the way it's been since before Lewis and Clark paddled that area in I don't know, 1804 probably was when they went through there. Yeah,
So
it's
who
amazing.
is Liam?
So Liam is my adopted son. He's 9. And so he came out with me there, and we spent a couple of weeks together, about a week there actually in the Missouri Breaks area. And he caught some very large fish out of there.
I saw you were stringing up some catfish like out of the river, right?
Yeah, yeah. So catfish and carp, and then we caught a really nice big walleye out of there as well. And so we're in a hunting and fishing Montana management district, which is Eastern Montana, Unit 7. And this huge, vast area, which is comprising the eastern part of the state, has almost no people. And so as a result, there are certain things that I can do there that I couldn't do in other places where it's more populated. So the hunting and fishing, some of those regulations are a bit more lax, just because there aren't the people, not the pressure. And one of those is around set lines. So a set line, you've got a heavy line, often made out of parachute cord, and then you have smaller lines with hooks that are baited along the length of it. And without any with just a regular fishing license, I can have 6 of those lines, each baited with 6 hooks. So I can have 36 hooks out at any given time. We set one line with 5 hooks on it. And every time we would bring it in, we would check it once in the morning and then once later in the day. And we would always catch 1 or 2 fish that would be somewhere between 3 and 5 pounds.
Wow.
And that was just with 5 hooks out there.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine, like, if I had the full complement of hooks out there, it would be, I could feed a small community.
Yeah.
And so, that's one of the things. When you and I first met, I was living in a teepee.
Yep.
And my income each year was between $3,000 and $3,500 per year. And I was not rich in money, but I was incredibly rich in time.
And
Each day.
experience.
Yeah, an experience. Yeah, each day was my own. I would wake up and then I would ask myself, what do I want to do with today? And so that level of freedom in which really my needs are simplified. Most people confuse needs and wants, but my needs are simplified down to keep my core body temperature at 98.6, drink enough water, eat enough calories, maintain good relationships, and try and get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
Like, that's the full complement of being a whole human, as far as I can tell. And so, yeah, that was easy to do in that way. You were going to say?
Well, after I had returned from my year experience out there, it was just a winter up in Earth Circle, but it was a year of living out of my car, traveling around between Canada, Montana, and Idaho.
Right.
I started to work at a co-op. I had a really kind of hardcore instructive boss. I worked in the kitchen, and she was immaculately trained. She was an excellent boss. She was almost militant, and she could be harsh. But I had this dream that I came back out to the land and started farming the land and just growing enough food to eat. And I would invite people out there from the co-op where I was working, and one by one they came out, and pretty soon they were without staff. And so this boss person showed up in my dream and said, like, hey, what are you doing? You're taking all my employees. And I was like, well, I realized that we work to make money so that we can be happy. But right now we can just do the work and be happy, and we don't need the money, and it's so much more fulfilling. And that was a dream that was like, has been so meaningful for me since then. It was right out of Earth Circle back when we first met. And is ever more important today. I mean, I'm thinking a lot about that, and a lot about what you're teaching. And you did a live stream last night with Wonia.
Yeah.
You can talk a bit about that if you want. I don't know that that's public. I think you had to like sign up for one of her courses to see that or something.
Yeah. That's something that content isn't available for your listeners here.
But what she is teaching about, and you can certainly find her on, is it Buckskin Revolution?
Buckskin Revolution. Yeah.
Both of you are providing the tools that would equip people, should they make that choice and have the opportunity to live a simpler life and live more in harmony, with nature. It's going to be a gradual continuum, a shift from where we are now to get there. But it's so important that we start to move in that direction, and that you guys are providing the information, resources, and demonstration of skills to help people get there. Is just, it's, as we said in the last podcast, it's more important now in human history than it seems to ever have been before. So it's really, really great. And you can trade off that big income for a rich life.
Right. Yeah. I find that it's very difficult to have a financially rich life and to also be time rich and to really put in the attention necessary to maintain healthy relationships and to be nurturing and bringing about regenerative practices into the ecology of your environment and the ecology of your community. I went from that time when you and I met, $3,000 to $3,500 a year, and feeling just so incredibly rich and abundant in my life, to my expenses were $5,000 to $6,000 per month. And I went through, I don't know, about 9 years of that. And yeah, it's really hard to find that balance. It really requires a lot of, I think, conscious sitting down and thinking about days, and thinking about how we want to value our time, which is always our most precious commodity, our time.
I'm reminded right now that as I was leaving, we were still in communication, and I have a feeling Niels was somehow involved in this communication too. I can't believe his name just popped up in my head. It's been so long, but that it was almost like, oh no, you're going to go to the workaday world, if once you make that step, it's going to be hard to come back,
Right.
I remember that. Yeah.
And so that's where I find myself now.
Mhm.
I don't have a house. I'm not paying rent. I'm not paying a mortgage anywhere. And yeah, it was funny. I ran into a couple of conservation officers while I was out in the breaks, and had a great conversation. They were asking me about my plans, what I was doing there, and I said, well, I'm going to come back in August, and I'll spend like the whole month of August scouting and exploring and being with the land. And then the archery season for deer and elk begins in the beginning of September, and that's another month. So then I'll be there for that amount of time too. And the officer, one of the guys, he looked at me and he says, well, what do you do for a living, if you don't mind my asking? And I'm like, well, yeah, like, here's my tent. My expenses are really minimal.
Mhm.
If I'm not paying rent, if I'm not paying a mortgage, getting enough food to eat from a place like that, like I went about 20 years without ever buying meat or fish, because I was doing so much living with the land. And, again, in this place, the Missouri Breaks, it's not that it's that unique in terms of what the land provides. Certainly when I was living out in the bush in Idaho, it was the same thing. There's just so much food. And once my needs are down to that very short list of, food, water, relationships, 98.6, getting a good night's sleep, it's easy. It's really
Yeah.
easy, and then I'm not working for a living. I'm living for a living.
And yet there's not as much free time as one would expect. At least that was my experience. I thought before I set out in that winter, and for the first couple of months I was totally alone. I imagined before doing it that I would have all this free time, and I would wonder how I would fill it.
Yeah,
But no, you
yeah,
fill it with, like, chopping wood and hauling water and making sure that your shelter is adequate for all the weather, and getting what food you can. And then after you have those things set, yeah, then it does become easy. Then we could do marvelous things. I ended up having a partner come up there, and man, we built, like, I hope I share this with you, but in case I didn't, maybe I hadn't. What we did after we were all set and the winter snows came in thick and heavy, we started with a walking path up to where she would park her car, and it became like a well-worn groove, hard packed snow,
right.
and on the sides it would go up quite a bit, and it was deep snow. And one day after a trip to
I
town,
remember, like, you created that sled path.
yes, that's it.
You
Yeah, it
had a
was like a
sled
luge run.
path that you turned
Yeah.
that into. Yeah,
Yeah, we put our
yeah.
groceries or whatever in it. We sent it
I
down,
did
and it
get
stopped right
some.
in front of the Earth Lodge. And then we started to make those things, carve them all over the
I did.
mountain like luge runs. Oh my God.
Okay.
You
Right.
remember
So
that
I
thing?
only got to ride on that once or twice, but yeah,
Okay.
just the one that went to the Earth Lodge. And it was so beautifully done, because
Yeah.
a little push at the beginning and like weaving through the trees.
Totally.
And I don't
Yes.
think I ever had to like kick all, like I just like arrived.
Hands free, bank up against the trees, left, right, and you end up like right in front. Yeah, it was so great. Yeah, I remember we had
I don't
taken a
know, that must
trip.
have been a quarter mile or something.
Must have been what?
Like a quarter mile?
It might have been. Yeah, it was
That's
quite a
that.
ways. Yeah, it was quite a ways.
Yeah.
We had been away from the Earth Lodge for a while. I don't know if we had gone to do a Vipassana up in Washington or if we were in the Southwest. But when we came back, we noticed there were some lights on in our place. And we came in and we were like, what's going on? And then there were these it was really dark, but there were some lanterns or some candles, and there were all these skinned rabbit carcasses hanging from the rafters. And you were in there, I think with Gaia, skinning rabbits and helping us out with some food, which was, oh man, rabbit stew was so good. that was a spooky surprise that turned into a
Right.
wonderful surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. It's another thought too about living a good life. I've lived in so many places where I never locked the door. And when I
Yes.
lived in a teepee, in a teepee, I didn't have a door.
Right.
So a level of trust with one's community is very much a backcountry kind of a thing. Now that I'm spending time in Montana again, still lots of places they're just never locked. And that's a sweet thing. That's something I really appreciate.
And in addition to the like primitive skills or living in harmony with nature skills that you are teaching, and Wonia for that matter, it's also the egalitarian community, like the non-selfish lifestyle. That is such an important lesson that goes along with everything else in order for us to get back
Yeah.
into balance. That is so necessary for us to make that adjustment.
Yeah, and that's I think the big reach for humanity today is to heal the trauma that's been caused through capitalism and colonialism, all of the different ways of dominating and diminishing others, and this myth of the exceptional human, everyone trying to be a hero, at least in their own bank account. And to heal all of that trauma and get back into egalitarianism, you don't really see that with people who are homesteading or have their own little private whatever somewhere out in the backcountry in the Mountain West. But there is something that is very present for all of those people who live remotely like that, and it's that there is a value of even strangers. It's always been the case that somebody who lives way out in the middle of nowhere, if I knock on the door, they're always like, "Yeah, who are you? Come on in. Let me put some coffee on."
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and if you're stranded on the side of the road and you might only have one other vehicle come past you that day,
Right.
they'll stop because they know what it's like. They know that they have to be able to rely on each other. Even if it's not egalitarian, there's still this level of support for one another that comes from need that's different from city life.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, there's that spirit of community. However disparate it may be, it is in place. It's sort of the background that you're living in. Ironically. And when we're all crowded together, we seem to become less connected, more separate.
Yeah, it does seem to be kind of a thing that when we have genuine need, then it's easier to value things, which is why I think refrigerators are such a challenging thing for people to have. How can you really have a deep connection with your sources of nourishment when it seems to just magically always be there? That I think is the experience of every child growing up in an affluent country. There's always food's magically there. So why do we have
where does
to,
it come from? It comes from the store.
Yeah. There's no need for gratitude, which the leap there now with technology is the laboratory grown meat that is now just starting to hit the markets. I'm deeply concerned about that. We already have such a huge issue with a disconnection from our sources of nourishment, from the ability to really empathically understand that we're receiving this ultimate gift of life. Now, if it's grown in a lab, then, do I really need to have gratitude for something that people are manufacturing and that never actually even had a mouth or had a stomach or had eyes to see? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe I just can eat without any concern whatsoever.
Yeah,
So yeah.
that is a dark side of that. I haven't thought about
Mhm.
that. And I've thought about it in terms of giving relief on the pressure of animal agriculture and these concentrated animal feed operations or CAFOs
Yeah.
and all the just insidious awfulness that goes on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. There's then going to be a disconnection and I feel like it's just all automated. So what's the point of gratitude? I'm paying for it. I'm giving someone a job, or yeah, there's going to be a disconnection there. Huh.
Yeah.
I got to
Yeah.
say also, I'll bet you've had the same experience. The less I've had, the freer I have felt. When I lived out
Mhm.
in Idaho, I had very little. I just had what was in my car, and I felt so free. But I still had things stored at my parents' houses. And when I moved to Sweden, I really got rid of 90+% of all my things. And that was huge. And it also felt so incredibly liberating, like
Yeah.
spiritually liberating.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I recommend that everyone at some point in their life give away, get rid of basically everything that you own and start over. There was a Hawaiian kahuna who talked about how every evening one should cut all of the aka cords. So these are um, metaphysical cords. You can imagine like a connection from you to each person that you have any kind of relationship, any kind of connection with. And you cut all of those connections so that when you see that person the next time, it's a new relationship and you're not projecting onto this person based on past experiences.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. Well, we have these connections with our stuff too, and it doesn't liberate us, it ties us down. These are ties, these are cords. And so to cut all of those ties, and I suppose that one can do that without having to get rid of all of those things, but that breaking through the attachment to it, and that's why I brought up in the beginning of our conversation how there's so much confusion that people tend to have between needs and wants. If I ask a group of kids, especially, like, what do you need? What do you need in your life? It's a big list. It's a really big list.
Uh-huh.
And it's filled with all kinds of wants.
Mm-hmm. And is it different when you ask adults what they need? Because they've thought about it more, or it depends who you ask.
Yeah, it tends to be different. It tends to be more adult,
Uh-huh.
it's
The
things
adult
that there
version of the
are
kids list.
recurring. Yeah, yeah. But it's a lot of like recurring payments. So there's a vehicle, there's a house,
Mm-hmm.
there's there are relationships that become more present for them because they know what it's like to struggle with partnerships. Um, Whereas for kids, it's like, like the kids will punch each other in the face and then the next minute they're laughing and playing
Right.
again.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
a little easier in that way. So yeah, it's the adult version of things that they want and calling them needs. And I think that much of that really comes from this lack of freedom that comes from a lack of being able to live in a free way. Comes from a lack of knowledge and a lack of opportunity. lack of privilege in a lot of cases. So, you
Yeah.
know, how many people are going to buy a tent and go out into the wilderness somewhere and or camp for 2 weeks at a time on public land, moving around, and be able to really meet their needs easily and efficiently? Nobody, if they're starting from ground zero.
Right.
Like if you're just trying that out, there's a steep learning curve to that. But once you get through it, then life changes. What did you find for how long that took you?
I found I was talking to myself after 2 months, and one of the things that I missed was community, was just another voice. Like I was telling jokes out loud and singing songs, and for me, uh, I never quite did it. I was catching mice and eating them. Miraculously, I was visited by someone from the Forest Service, and I was grateful for that visit. And he came up and said, "Are you going to take a deer for food this winter?" And I said, "The only way I'll take a deer," because I was like a vegetarian, and I wasn't about to
Mhm.
like go hunt. And I have a different position on that, but at the time that was my position, and I wasn't probably ready to do that. Even though I kept a 22 little pea shooter with me through the winter, I said the only way I'll take a deer for food this winter is if it drops dead in front of the Earth Lodge. And it was the next day. This guy
Right.
left. The next day, there was a deer that, well, I had gone to town. I was looking for work through the winter to have some kind of income for gas, basically. And I saw these 5 turkey vultures on a log right across the street from where I'd parked the car for the Earth Lodge. And I was fascinated by these huge birds. So I stopped the car and went to look at them. And one by one, they flew away once they detected me. And what they revealed was like the stiff leg of a deer sticking out from behind the
Yeah.
log. And then you came up, man. The timing was just unbelievable because you then came up like the next day and helped
Yeah.
me to harvest that deer, because I also wouldn't have known how to do that. That was
Right.
incredible. So you
Yeah.
helped me tie it up and dress it, and you know, like there was manna from heaven. That's kind of how I got by initially, and then I ordered buckets of dried split peas and oats, and like dried
Yeah.
freeze dried
Yeah.
vegetables,
Yeah.
and dumpster diving. Did a lot of dumpster diving between those two competing supermarkets in that very small town down at the bottom of the mountain, man. They were plentiful.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's funny that in some countries, food is such a major percentage of the amount of money that they're spending each month, and not so much in the US. Food's cheap, food's so
Right.
available, and then
Yes.
of course, living outdoors, there's the snaring of the rabbits, and then there's the deer. In areas with elk, a big bull, a big male, is about 350 pounds of meat.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes it all very, very straightforward in a lot of ways.
And that can last you a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was looking at my phone before, not because I was checking or while I was playing Words with Friends. No, I was checking your notes that you had communicated with me earlier, and thanks for reminding me of it in your response just before this recording, to talk about sustainability and regenerative practices, and then songs of place. But I think we're moving towards that, or we've been talking around the outskirts of sustainability, how we live in a more sustainable way,
Right,
because
right.
absolutely the model we're living in right now, with continual population growth and continual consumption growth, is not sustainable. It is not sustainable. So let's talk about that.
Right, right. Okay, so let's look at this place where I just was in the Missouri Breaks, a place that it's it's virtually the same as it always has been. There's very little influence of industry or population of humans there, and some of the key things there that are issues is there's cattle ranching, and there's in some of the further upstream areas, there is agriculture. And so there's agricultural runoff, and then there's the issues of the cows pooping in the water and, mucking up that. But for the most part, you still have very, very, very few humans that are there, and you still have very healthy populations of animals, and the ecosystem is functioning well, this interrelated system. But when we look at all of these homesteads that, through the Homestead Act, people coming in there and they're like, all right, we're going to bend this environment to our will,
right,
and we're going to make it produce a paycheck or produce something that is going to nourish our family, allow us to buy stuff. Paychecks are just energy, so it's all that. And we see that here is a landscape that just, it's hard. It's a hard place. The winters are extreme. Water is drinkable water is a limited commodity. A lot of the water out there is not drinkable naturally because of a high alkali content. And so those people, those homesteaders, they were the ones that got broken, because they tried to impose a different system. This is colonialism. We're gonna bring our culture, and we're going to impose it upon this environment and bend it to our will, and then we will have a new environment that we feel comfortable with. And this is kind of a cool place, because the land is like, I'm going to play that game. Like, you're either going to play by my rules or you're going to get out.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. People died and people left, but almost nobody stayed farming in that area. But the land is still doing what the land's always done out there, which is have a really huge elk population and deer population, and there's tons of fish, and and then there's the plants that one can go and forage. There's the natural abundance. And so, in terms of sustainability, we see that the easy answer around sustainability is just don't have humans. If we just don't put humans into the equation, then nature does just fine on its own.
Sure.
But if we are going to have humans in the equation, then they have to play by the rules. There are natural principles there. And one of them, the biggest ones, is that it's a closed system. There is no part of it that is like, oh, okay, well, we made this trash, and now we have to take this trash and we're going to put it in a hole and pretend it doesn't exist
we'll
anymore.
Bury it.
Right. Yeah. We're going to hide it. Hiding things always works so good. And, we do the same thing with our human waste and the water from our showers, and all of that is just like, we want to move it away from where we're living to someplace else. Well, there's too many people on the planet now. There is no someplace else. So we close all of those loops, and we then have our humanure that we are composting and bringing back into the soil. We have no trash, which, these are all things that today, with the incredible technological breakthroughs that are happening weekly right now, because everything is moving forward so quickly due to artificial intelligence, big data and whatnot, that there's no need for any kind of packaging that doesn't break down, that isn't compostable. Everything that we buy in the store that's in a package should be a compostable package. We have that technology right now. And then every place where you purchase these sorts of things, close by, there needs to be some place that can receive that compostable packaging material and compost it, so that nothing goes into a landfill. Everything either gets recycled, repurposed, or composted. And then through the composting, we're nourishing the soil. And that's the leap that we need to be getting to. So, it used to be that the buzzword was sustainable. We gotta achieve sustainability. Well, we've broken things so much now that we need to be talking about regeneration. So how are we increasing the ability of the land to have more abundance and more diversity?
Yeah, I
Part of
heard.
that is composting,
Uh,
but
have you heard of a guy named?
back.
There's a book called Cradle to Cradle. I think the author is McDonough, but he was against this model of sustainability where we are just choking the earth more slowly. He would rather look at a model of, say, ants that live in balance and harmony with the ecosystem,
Right.
and do things a different way. And he's been somewhat successful in it. And he talks about even in industry, if we still want our televisions or laptops, hello, um, or whatever, that they are built in such a way that each component part is able to be returned to the manufacturer to be stripped down and recycled into industrial nutrient streams
Right.
that are just reused for the next generation. And so
Yeah.
you take the landfill out of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I haven't read that book. I've heard the title, so maybe it's something I need to
It's
just.
good. It's old now. It's probably outdated. There's probably a new one that he's been doing, but I understand he's been working in China. But yeah, there's a lot we can do, but why are we not?
Um, I'm going to say that
Money,
it's
money.
yeah, it's because we have this uniquely long childhood. So we were born with our deep instincts, and we always have those, so we can always kind of go back to that. But then we have this overlay, which is everything that we learn during this long childhood, when we're like a sponge and we look around at our environment, and everything that we see we take as being right and normal and good. And we have this deep trust, because it's the way that we've evolved, that all of the people in our community are going to teach us how to live a whole, beautiful, flourishing life. They're going to give us all of the best strategies. And, for 99.999% of the time we've been on two legs, that was the case. It was inconceivable that there would be some adult who would want to take advantage of us, to get the best deal out of us, who would withhold information that could be useful for us to have a great life. That's just like inconceivable. And yet that's our reality. So, we take that on as we're growing up, and we're like, oh, so this incredibly traumatized world that I'm living in is normal and right and good. And we are indoctrinated into this.
Yeah.
And
So even though it is happening all the time, we couldn't possibly imagine that that is the snare that is happening. So we think that
yeah,
what is that reality of taking advantage of our lives is actually a trustworthy reality with our best interests at heart. And it's
yeah,
absolutely different than that.
yeah. It's like the two fish, and the one says, hey, how's the water today? And the other one asks, well, what's water?
Yeah.
If you're in it, and this is normal, but it's not normal. And so I think that that's a big part of the anxiety that humanity has today. This level of stress that we carry with us that's so unhealthy, is at a deeper level, we know this is fucked. At a deeper level, we know that people are lying to us. We know that we are being harmed by people who should be supporting us and cooperating. And we know it's wrong, but we don't know it enough. We're not in touch with it enough to be able to say, like, I'm going to step away from everything that everyone else is doing. So we've just kind of gotten onto this hamster wheel.
And it seems like even worse now, as some of that kind of attitude is coming to light more. That we see there are people doing bad things. we're beginning to normalize it. We sort of can more easily shrug it off until it's really, really bad. But, really bad, just bad, we're like, yeah, well, that's how it is as adults.
Right.
And that's not okay. That's
Yeah.
not sustainable.
Yeah. I think what's really become so profoundly disturbing for me since Trump was elected in 2016, and then we went through all of that, and now I'm a lot more politically engaged now, is that lying has become normalized, and there's a level of acceptance around, well, everybody lies, corporations lie, governments lie, can't trust anybody. And that's wrong. That is so deeply wrong and so deeply unsupportive of who we are as humans. And it needs to change. I've talked a fair bit on this show about exponential growth and where we are as a species with the way that technology is on this growth curve that looks like that, and we're somewhere like right about here on that growth curve, and the rocket ship is about to take off. What that means is that whatever is right and whatever is wrong at this time, when we look forward not that many years, we are going to just exacerbate, to emphasize, to make bigger everything that's right and everything that's wrong. And right now, there's way too many things that are wrong. We have people in places of power that we can't trust. And when you put that into an exponential growth curve, we have widening disparity between those who have and those who have not. We have destroyed ecosystems, we have global warming, and we have a planet that is in the midst of the six greatest extinction events. We have so many things that are wrong, but the potential is magical. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Because if you get those things right, and then you put it into that curve, wow, we have a future that everyone feels really good about, that restores ecosystems, that brings back species. We have the technology to bring back species that have been extinct. Where I was just in the Missouri Breaks there's an Audubon's bighorn sheep that's extinct. There is a plains elk that was all hunted to extinction and replaced with Rocky Mountain elk that came from around the Yellowstone area.
But it's come back through genetic manipulation, you're saying?
No, it hasn't yet, but the potential is now there. Like, we're right on the edge of being able to extract DNA from
woolly mammoths.
Yeah, right. But to extract the DNA from bones and fur from museum specimens and things, like, we still have biological material from these animals in storage. And we're almost to the point where we can bring back those species. And that brings us into Song of the Land, which we've talked about here before. I like to think of it as, when I'm in a really healthy, intact, natural environment, I'm listening to the most beautiful symphony. And it's a symphony that is not just sound, but it's all aspects of beingness. So like in this picture behind me, which is not really where I am, there is a balance between the overstory species of, like, that's a sequoia, interior redwood, one of the oldest species on the planet. And then there's Douglas fir trees that are in here, and then we've got an understory, and then we've got the microbes in the soil and all of that. And nature organizes itself that way without us doing anything. But when we walk into a forest in which things are naturally orchestrated that way, like you can see the snags here, these dead trees, which are part of a healthy forest, the decay is part of the process. There is a profound sense of ease, because everything is right. There's a sense of rightness to it, that this is a stable environment. And through that stability, there can be understanding and connection. And then I don't have anxiety about what's going to happen next, because everything around me is telling me it's all good.
Yeah.
And then, you've got the way that the birds are speaking about what's happening in the world there, and all of the other animals, everything interconnected. And being tapped into that, like friends of mine that go and spend time with the San Bushmen out in Botswana, and they talk about how they're living in a place with lions and hyenas and really poisonous snakes and all of these different things that are potentially life-threatening. The kids are running around and they're playing, and they're very much like kids anywhere, not quite as noisy. And as soon as the bird calls change, as soon as there's that first call that says, hey, something's moving through, every child freezes. No, they just freeze. And then they turn and they assess. And that's something that's sort of built into them through culture, that they are deeply connected with their environment, and that connection is what keeps them safe. So yeah, I'd love to have Audubon's bighorn sheep and plains elk and these other animals reintroduced into this environment. And then you have something that is more diverse and therefore more stable, and also is then able to sing that really old symphony, to play that really old symphony that puts us all at ease. When I'm in a city, there's the robin there that's like doing its best to sing its song and to be like, it's all good. It's all good. Check me out. Look at me, babes. Here I am. I got my tree. I got my little patch of lawn over here. And then you've got like the jackhammer over there, and you've got, the cars that are over here, and you've got, the humming of all types of machinery, and the people. And those sounds and those ways of being are disconnected from one another, often very intentionally so. They don't want to notice all of these other things. And so it's impossible, or very challenging, to have that same sense of deep ease in that environment, because everything is disconnected. And we don't know when we're safe, because we don't know what's coming next. So, songs of place is tied into regenerative practices. We should have a stable song of our place, and though that song needs to be coherent, all of the pieces need to be relating to each other.
Humming in harmony.
Yeah. Like when a robin is calling, the robin is listening to all of the other sounds in its environment, so that when it's singing, it's not singing on top of another bird that's singing. Like sometimes the dawn chorus gets to be really busy and there's a fair bit of overlap. But generally speaking, the birds are not trying to walk on each other. They're trying to listen, like, oh, okay, Jay is calling over there. Now I'm going to do my call. Now I'm going to pause. Now there's a wood thrush that's calling over here. Now that bird is pausing. The jay starts up again. Like they're polite in that way. They're connected. And when we can consciously integrate humanity into that song, so that we are playing the game, then we're all going to feel a whole lot more calm and relaxed. That's one part of regenerative practices. And when we look at, Native people have been living in that Missouri Breaks area for, 12,000 years or more. Some of the Native people, they have stories that just simply say, well, we've always been here.
Right.
And there's a myth that says that they didn't really do anything to change the land. They lived in harmony, which means that they simply, I don't know, live like bears and deer. Well, that's not accurate. They were doing an awful lot that was intentionally modifying the landscape, but it was still done according to natural principles. So they
Sure.
were using fire a lot. They were setting prescribed burns that cleared underbrush, that brought in new growth, that kind of shifted game populations over to those areas of new growth, made it easier to hunt. They were coppicing, cutting back certain kinds of bushes and shrubs so that they were producing good basketry material. And they were so Hell's Canyon area that you're familiar with there in Idaho, one of the dominant, most important kinds of food sources there is called couscous.
Yeah. Couscous.
And
The Couscous
yeah,
Plains, right?
what's that?
Weren't there like even large plains of couscous? I'm thinking maybe of Montana, just outside Browning. There are these couscous plains, I think.
So there's Lomatium couse, which is a also called biscuit root, but there's 30 some species, or I think there's more than that actually. And this just happens to be one that's really really tasty, and I've always seen it at higher elevation, so I don't think they're in Montana.
Okay.
Where you're thinking. There's camas, which might be what you're thinking.
I think that's it. Yeah, probably.
Okay. Yeah, that was more like out in the more open areas.
Yeah.
But specifically with this Lomatium couse, the native people there, the Nimipu, the Nez Perce, they have a saying that, when you stop digging, then the plant disappears. And so this is a plant that has a root system that it goes down quite far, not really far, but it goes down far enough where when you tend to dig up the root, you tend to break it. And you get this much, but there's still some that's down deeper. And so it then emphasizes a deeper root system to it. And by aerating the soil, breaking it up a little bit, by removing that upper portion, then when it comes back, it divides, and you end up with these tended root gardens, which are incredibly abundant. And if you hadn't been tending them, then they wouldn't be.
Right. So you're encouraging its strengthening and its population growth by harvesting it.
Yeah. And, so looking at human impact, because the early humans here, or I should say the native peoples, when they were still living in direct relationship with the land in a hunter-gatherer kind of a manner, they were in many ways improving the landscape. They were focused on, how do I live a life which shows my depth of connection and gratitude. And so that is, if I'm going to go and hunt elk like I will this fall, what can I give back to this place? And certainly gratitude is something I will be giving back to it. And that's real, and that's important. And then there's also planting back seeds of plants that have been, whose populations have been harmed by misuse of the land, by introduction of cattle and other things out there. That's something that I'm looking at. And it's that kind of a focus that brings us into more right relationship. So that, when we're listening to these songs of the land, that they really are all connected, and it really does bring us back into that really deep sense of ease. Now, having said that, it was very cool that, every place has a unique song. And in the Missouri Breaks, wow, I have not hung out in a place that has that kind of a song before. So Liam went to bed one night, and I read him a story. He's asleep. I go outside, and I was going to go for a walk, but every step that I take, I can just hear this very soft sound of my clothing moving against my skin. And what I'm really picking up is that, yes, there are these sounds that are happening around me. I can hear the Missouri River. I can hear a bittern that's calling. I can hear geese every once in a while. They're sort of mumbling and grumbling to themselves. But there are all of these whisper sounds. So there's sounds that are like, they're so soft that it's right on that edge of imagination and tangibility. And that's the edge that I want to pay attention to. Yeah. And so I don't want to impose my way through this landscape. I'm just going to sit and just be absolutely still so that I can really hear the whispers. And yeah, so different, being in a place where this land is hard. The water is poison in a lot of places. You can't drink it, and the winters are so hard, and all the, so many of the settlers died or experienced so much suffering there. And I started noticing even the calls of animals that I was very familiar with. Like there was a coyote that called a few times during the night, and the manner in which the coyote was calling was different than other places, because there's a lot of openness to this landscape. It's not like dense forests. There's willows or cottonwoods. None of those had leaves out back. And so the coyote, instead of having like this long, it would instead be like, and then like the coyote's listening back too, because it's just that little bit of a yip puts out so much into this otherwise what seems like a very empty landscape, but is actually really full. Yeah, just different ways of being in this place. And then at one point I'm listening and I just hear like, that is a big animal. That is a really big animal that's over there. And I can hear like there's some like thrashing in the undergrowth a little bit in the brush. And I'm like, huh. And then I realized, oh, okay, this is one of my friends. This is a beaver that's over there that is like cutting down trees and dragging trees. And I think there's a piece there that really kind of hit me at the time when I was listening for that beaver or hearing that beaver. Because at first, all I knew was that this is a fairly good sized animal, a powerful animal that's like moving things around over there and is fairly close. And so I had some fear come up inside of me, because the fear is always there around, like, I'm sitting out here in the dark. I can't see very well. I'm in a newish place. There's a lot of unknown. And for me, when I talk about fear, I'm talking about anything that causes that tension, causes a certain amount of cerebral shutdown, puts us into even the slightest little bit of feeling like I'm needing to protect myself, or feeling like I'm needing to push something away, that fight, flight, freeze kind of a thing. And so what some people might call, well, I felt a little nervous, or I felt a little anxiety, and that's just fear. It's just a spectrum of that. And so I had like the tiniest bit of nervousness come up, but it was fear. And we always have that choice. What am I going to do with uncertainty? What am I going to do with my vulnerability in this space? Am I going to choose love or am I going to choose fear? And for me, the choice is always love. And that requires me to relax more deeply, to speak to my muscles, to cause them to soften, to open up my heart, to let go of any sort of protective stance that I might be holding, and kind of even let go of self, in a way, where I'm letting go of my thought patterns, letting go of my attention, even to, yeah, I know that there's something that's big over there, and I'm going to let go of my attention on that thing and simply allow myself to, I don't know, disappear in a way and just be rather than focus. And to just sort of like allow myself to open and warm and soften and to feel love for just being in this place, even though I was in a position where I was like, I don't really know what's over there. I don't know what that is. And I think that at a certain level, that sounds crazy. And yet this has been my practice. My practice has been to let go of these things that are not love, to let go of, what is that in the movie Dune? Fear is the mind killer.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
There's going to be a new one, but yeah.
yeah, fear
Yeah.
kills so much, degrades so much of who we are and what our potential is.
What if it's a bear? What if it is a bear that you hear? And I'll say, when I was fasting one time in Browning, up on the land there, up on the mountain, small mountain compared to the other mountains around there, but nevertheless, Wilbert's Mountain up there.
Yeah.
I was with another guy who was practicing some Cheyenne way, and he was just wrapped in a sheet, sitting in one spot the whole time without moving. And what is it?
That's what he grabbed. I've been a half an hour sitting with him.
Oh, he was puking it?
No.
Sorry, we had a dog issue. All right. Thanks. So up on the hill, he was just sitting there in a sheet in one place for the whole time. And the way that, I don't know if, did you ever go up there and fast? They show you like, all right. So their way is you make like a tobacco circle, and then you sit there, and there's of course no eating food, no water, and you can smoke tobacco and pray, and that's about what you do. And I heard this really loud noise, and like a dog barking, but not. I heard this really loud noise, and I thought, this guy is doing something. He's making some noise. What's this guy doing? I didn't know his practice was to sit still. And he was thinking the same of me. And when we left, is after 2 nights, we came back down. It had been a bear that had like been moving, like rolling over huge trees to probably get at the grubs or whatever was underneath.
Yeah.
Those are grizzlies, and they were very close to us, but we were keeping our peacefulness. And I knew at that time, like they said, there was a bear up there. Someone had seen a bear in the sweat lodge, like it was, you probably know who it was. I just won't say his name because he's so elusive on social media. But anyways, he has communication with the bear, and he saw there's a bear near there. And I was told, be careful, there's a bear around here right now. And sure enough, it showed up while we were up there fasting, but we kept our peacefulness, and the bear was peaceful with us too. Right. Like there's something about that. And I wonder if we would have been charged with fear and intrusion and, territorialism, if there would have been more of a meeting or a conflict or a clash.
Yeah. Well, certainly, every predator is tuned to that the fear pheromones that we send out, the fear behaviorisms that we put out, because if you're afraid, then you're communicating that you're vulnerable, that you don't trust you to get out of this situation. Okay. And the fight or flight kind of a thing. Well, I mean, predators dig that. Like, that's what they're really into that. Like, oh, you want to run? Cool. I totally want to run
Like
after.
they're saying they can smell fear. I mean, that's essentially what's happening. Yeah.
It's a real thing. Yeah. And the other side to it, which is also tied to fear, is that aggressiveness. If you want to instigate a bear to charge you, then you stare at it, because that's what they do to each other. They sort of like lock their energies together, and then it's a confrontation has begun. Whereas if you turn your head to the side and you speak calmly, like, hey bear, human over here, doing my thing, sorry I'm in your way. And it's interesting, the putting out of tobacco in a circle around and then smoking the tobacco, and the offering of tobacco, because tobacco is not something that anything else out in the environment is really actually using. None of the plants or the animals are out there smoking it.
Mhm.
And so when that tobacco is placed, tobacco is a communication plant. Placing the tobacco is for you. It's so that you have the ability to dissolve those walls between self and other, so that you can actually be interconnected with your place, with all those beings and energies.
It's communication.
Yeah, it's a communication plant. And so it is one of those guides along the human journey that help us to better connect. And that's why it's there. That's why we do that. And what a blessing to be able to have that kind of connection with one of these apex predators, one of these incredible beings out there. And should you be afraid? Is that going to help? Like, I always think about it like, what am I really here in this lifetime for? Because so many people, they never actually really live their life. They're
Especially
going
if they're always responding or reacting in a fear way.
Yeah. Another example is throughout the world, when we look at indigenous peoples, we see that most of them were immediate return hunter-gatherers. And immediate return means that the calories that you eat each day are pretty much the calories that you gather that day. You're not storing food, and or you're not storing it for any appreciable length of time. Like, you kill some big animal and then you're eating it until it's gone, but you're not focused on storing. And throughout northern North America, we see that every year there would be a predictable starvation time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's predictable. Every year there is, at the end of the winter, the snow is getting like wet and the conditions are hard and the spring plants haven't come through yet. And like it's every single year. And so in our Western way of thinking, it's very logical, like, oh, okay, so don't do that. Like, we'll just store food and we'll set it aside because we know this time is coming. So we'll just create artificial security through storage. And they didn't do that. And the reason, I believe, is because there is a faith and a depth of interconnectedness that comes from being a part of the land. And so you go through it. And if you stored up that food, then you wouldn't receive the same lessons. You wouldn't, like, again, it's about being a part of the land rather than imposing one's own culture upon it. And being a part of the land means that, yeah, there's like a hard time that comes, and we know this hard time comes, and we know that, yeah, sometimes some people are going to starve. We're going to get really hungry, and that's normal. And it's normal and right and good. That's our culture, and that's the land's culture. And the land says, live this way. That's how we go. It's not like what the other animals are experiencing is very different.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody has their way, but certainly some of the ones that we really connect with, like the deer and the elk, they're having a hard time right there at that time too. It would be unnatural for us to be experiencing abundance when so many are actually kind of like just can't wait until those first green shoots start coming out of the ground. We want to feel that too. We want to have that joy of like, we've come through another long sleep.
Yeah.
The cold time is past, and now we can rejoice because easier, warmer days are here.
And that's really deepening that connection and appreciation of where the food comes from and of place and of
Yeah.
being a good steward of or participant and being in harmony with the land. Steward is seems a bit still this mentality of I'm in charge and I shall take care of the land. It feels like that a
Mhm.
bit. But anyways, at least being in balance with cultivating what is there to take and then to give back.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of like if your refrigerator is always there and always full, then how do you have gratitude for your sources of nourishment? And if you are always living in a climate controlled house and the food is always there and the power always comes on and your life is all good and stable, then when do you pause and say, wow, like I'm so grateful because this moment is different from that moment?
Chris, I happen to think that this is my own conjecture, personal opinion, but the whole world, and it sounds awful, and half of it is gloomy and half of it is not, but the whole world won't be saved. It seems that there's going to be a division. This is again just my opinion. I'm not saying this is said anywhere else, but like there's going to be a division among people that some people are going to reject anything we're talking about here and just go on, eating more and more and accumulating things and wealth and power. Um, and I don't know where the break is, if it's 50-50 or if it's 60-40 or whatever or less. Um, but many people will continue on and be detached, but there will be those that are beginning to pay attention. And when you talk about a song of place, there's a place that is this particular space in time that we are in right now. And the last interview we did, we talked about you as always being sort of this bridge, like, that's just your role.
Yeah.
And for this space and time we're in, this place, this is what you're saying is the song of this place and is the song of that bridge of helping to bring those that will listen, however, whatever majority, minority they are, to help understand what it takes to come back into that balance. First, just to start with the gratitude and appreciation for what they do have, and to start to extend that appreciation to an understanding of where those things come from, that they don't, food just doesn't come from the grocery store.
Yeah.
Clean water doesn't just come from the tap at the sink.
Right.
And the more that we can lean in that direction, those are the people that will be able to survive whatever big changes may come, which unfortunately it seems to me is also inevitable, that for people to really make that change, some shit's going to have to hit a whole bunch of fans.
Yeah, yeah. It does seem like humans are a bit wired to keep doing what they've been doing until they hit rock bottom.
So far, so good from
It's
Ishmael.
it's a very rare human that's like, no, I actually really dig personal growth. Like I really dig like exploring my traumas
Shadow
and
work. Yeah.
it seems to be a rare thing. And that I think is also cultural, and that's something that we need to shine some light on and cultivate strategies which make that shadow work, that trauma healing, to be something that we dig,
Yeah.
that we really love.
Encourage,
And
embrace, and support.
yeah, and we have like we know how to be happy. That's not some crazy strategy or technology that is required to get us there. We know what sorts of things tend to produce humans that are really happy and that feel like their lives are useful and good and flourishing. And the Western approach tends to be that, you need to meditate and you need to cultivate gratitude and you need to do all of these things are all about you. And when we take that and then we expand that to include our community, because if I am meditating and I'm bringing forth my gratitude and I'm doing all of this great stuff, but then I've got these people that are just fucking lying to me. I've got corporations and government that is not working in my best interest, then I'm in an environment which is not performing a symphony that is coherent. And so we need to expand that approach of, all of our personal growth and include community growth, societal growth, and ecological connection, ecological regeneration, so that, we and everything around us are performing a symphony that everybody likes to listen to, that everybody likes to perform in.
Yeah.
And I think it's as simple as that and as complex as that.
Yeah. Simple, easy to say, difficult to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? You have some busy times coming up. What are you going to be doing? And where can people continue to learn from you?
Yeah. Well, folks can always go on to my website at wisdomkeepers.us because it's about us. And then there'll be classes and things that get posted there on occasion. I'm here in LA at the moment, and I'm offering some classes June and July. There's like a family summer camp that we'll be doing up in the Sierra Forest under some of the oldest trees on the planet. And then I'm going to go back up to Montana, and I'm going to spend 2 months really immersed in wildness, really immersed in what nature wants to teach me. And I'll be bow hunting for elk and deer while I'm up there. And then I'll come back down to California and kind of settle in there for the winter. I'll have some classes going on, but I'm not living really, I don't have a house. I'm not renting or paying a mortgage. And so I'm untethered and allowing myself to kind of be here and there. And that's leading me into some the time and focus for some other projects. So one of those is I'm working with a very talented film guy, Joshua Salek, down here in LA, and he and I are working together to create a homeschooling curriculum, which is also going to be like
Great.
super fun and entertaining for families and anybody. And it'll all be about how do we move through nature and how do we practice these ancient skills in such a way that they are doors that open so that we can more deeply understand who we are and where we've come from and where we're going. Everything is a metaphor. Everything has a deeper lesson attached to it. Starting fires with sticks is not about just the material and the method. It's also, the relationships and how that's a metaphor for all of the other kinds of relationships that we might have as a two-legged. Mm-hmm. So that's coming too.
Wisdomkeepers.us.
Yes.
All right. And that is really great. I've thought, in my thinking about what I'm going to do in season 2 and us doing this video here, and I think I'm going to start to include video, it is to provide some meaningful, just to add in just, more of this interview and this kind of information to help whoever wants to have access to it, to find it, have access to it. add it to what they're learning and the direction that they're going. It's so good that that's the project you're working on. That's super cool. I'm excited about it. Want to hear more about it as it goes. Should we do another moon then?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I love it, Chris. Thanks.
I will have, like, I'm heading in a few days back up to Montana, and I'll be in the backcountry for about a month before I come back to LA, and then I'll be here for a couple of months. So the next time we check in, I'll have more stories.
Right on. Great. Thank you, Chris.
Always a pleasure, Ken. Thank you.
Likewise. Love you. All right.
You too.
Until next time. Bye.
Bye now.
Hey man, we're done recording.
It says that you're still recording.
Oh, does it? It says, oh, I said end meeting. Oh, now what do I do? Great. Oh, it's still recording. All right, here we go. Hang on a second.